Hello all, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a project update video for this 1/6 scale Armortek M4A4 Sherman tank. Since the last video update, progress has been made to the model's upper hull, top deck, as well as the turret. We'll be going over all of these additions in this video. Starting with the model's front hull, as you can see, the front hull is very close to being ready for paint. Since the last video update, the model's tin work has all been completed. This would include the bow front fenders, as well as the brush guards for the headlights. Both the headlights, as well as the front fenders, are listed on the EastCoastArmory.com product line. Both front fenders of the vehicle are fabricated out of sheet metal and are attached via fasteners to the fastener mounts that I fabricated in an earlier video. The rigidity bulge that's present on all Sherman front fenders is present on this model here, and the fender blister itself is actually pressed into the plate just like the real tank. The entire unit is all soldered together. This includes the sidewall as well as the rigidity strip that we have here. One thing as of note, when it comes to mounting on the tank's fender, pretty much every single model on the market has made an error. This includes vehicles from 1/35 scale all the way up to 1/16 scale. On both VVSS and HVSS Shermans, the way the fender mounts to the tank, it gets affixed to the top hull via a metal strip and 3 bolts. When it runs down the side here, the fender actually runs along the final drive and is actually bolted to the final drive like we have in here. By adding that bolt there, the fender is held nice in its place. Now, because the final drive in this tank was already pre-installed, I didn't want to go ahead and remove the bolt in order to mount on the fastener. So what I did was I soldered a nut to the end of the sidewall here. The purpose of that, it gives the illusion of the firm mounting of the fender. The fender itself, however, does have a little plate to it, which is helpful if any big object gets pulled up by the track. The fender will simply give out of the way rather than having to break something. This is present on both fenders that we have here. It's also common in the field to have a piece of wood, like a plank, simply placed over these two supports. By the addition of the plank, that makes a little storage location where the crews would stow anything from equipment to sandbags on the front portion here of the transmission. This is just a side note, and I will not be performing this procedure on my model. Moving up from the fenders, we have here the tank Siren. I went ahead and used a Siren that's offered by Panzerwerk.com. The Panzerwerk Siren is a single piece casting and is very intricately detailed with the grill portion here that's nice finely casted. Also included with the casting is a small little identification tag which is pre-molded in to the top portion of the Siren. The Siren that is replicated here is more of the earlier style Siren and is a lot different compared to the funnel horn, which is typically found on my 1/6 scale American tanks. Also, if we notice, the Siren is not installed or is not fitted to the tank in its usual location. Typically on Shermans, the Siren or the funnel horn would be affixed to the front portion here of the glacis plate. There would also be a very elaborate, very ornate brush guard, which would be cradling and welded around this Siren here to protect it from any damage. When the Shermans were first developed, the Siren's location was actually designed to be like this one here, atop of the front fender. This is a carryover from the M3 Lee, as the M3 Lee features a lot of components that are affixed to the tin work. Mounting the Siren to this location here was very problematic and was very susceptible to damage from brushes and other debris. It was because of that which prompted the design to be changed from having the Siren fixed to the fender to affixed to the front glacis plate, and also to have a brush guard constructed around it. And again, because this tank is being built for such an early war time frame, the fender mounted Siren is a nice touch. To affix the Siren to the sheet metal work, this is also done just like on the real tank with that of a fastener. There is a threaded rod that enters into the Siren and is firmly affixed in place. The Siren is then held in place to the fender via a single hex nut. Once the unit was tightened, the Siren is permanently affixed to the fender in a manner which is very similar to that of the real tank. The Siren's power cable was also added. The power cable nub is actually molded into the Panzerwerk unit and was simply drilled out. A corresponding hole was drilled out on the tank's plate, and a simple wire was added. The addition of the wire also greatly helps the accuracy of the model. Moving our way up from the Siren, we have here the tarpaulin rail, which has been fitted around the Bow M1919 machine gun. The tarpaulin rail itself is a resin component which is listed on the EastCoastArmory.com product line. Moving our way from the tarpaulin rail, we have here the brush guard, which has been affixed to the front headlights. The kit does supply you with 2 laser-cut, pre-bent sheet metal brush guards. The brush guards are nicely shaped. However, because I replaced the bulb with the ECA version, the kit supplied brush guards were not very compatible. So rather than trying to salvage the kit ones, I simply just replaced them with the sheet metal ECA ones. Along with being all soldered together, the ECA units also have on their little jars for the headlight plug. Like I've mentioned in a lot of my American Tank videos, American Tanks are designed so that when the headlight is not in use, a chain retained plug would be inserted into its place to prevent water or any type of moisture to enter inside the vehicle. As for the plug and the chain itself, that detail will be added after the model is painted. Moving our way to the hatch wells, the backup periscope lids have also been added. The lids that you see here are also the EastCoastArmory.com resin ones. The kit does supply you with sheet metal periscope lids. However, the ECA ones have a little bit more detailing on them, and we're using their place. Moving our way to the top deck. First, the torch cut lines were added to the front glacis plate. These torch line details were added to both sides of the vehicle, as was the front air ventilators. On these earlier Shermans, they received 2 blowers on either side of the 2 bow hatches. The blowers that you see here are the ECA versions. Now, the kit does supply you with CNC aluminum ones. The kit components are actually very nice. They're properly scaled, assemble easy, and are properly shaped. The only thing missing on the kit versions is the cast texture as well as the casting marks, which are found on the ECA resin ones. Rather than having to take the time to add these same details to the Armortek kit one, I simply just bait and switch them with the ECA variants. Also, as a side note, we have here the welds, which have been added around the circumference of the ventilator guard, as well as the drainage holes have also been added. The same exact detail is a mirror image on the reverse side of the tank. On the real Sherman tank, the engine compartment is separate from the 2 hull sides. The purpose of this is that with the removal of several bolts, the entire engine deck can be removed, getting access to the engine. Now, because of the way the Armortek kit is designed, in that the rear deck is one continuous metal stamping, the crease lines for the engine deck are not present. To add them really helps the look of the vehicle, and to do that, because of the material that it's made of, I use a Dremel with a cutting stone, namely a fiberglass cutting stone like the one I have here. This procedure has to be done with extreme caution, because if you go offline, the piece will be ruined and it will have to be redone with some body work. In order to perform the procedure and do it nice and neatly, the way I like to do is I first mark the line where the crease will be with a Sharpie. Once I have the line marked, I take 2 pieces of masking tape and run them along each edge of the Sharpie. The 2 pieces of tape are nice and square and give me a nice visual straight edge, along with the color of the Sharpie to indicate where I have to go with the Dremel. Now, the procedure is done with the Dremel, and the tape and the line act as nothing more as a guide to guide my eye and my hand to carefully go ahead and etch the line in by hand. You have to take extreme care doing this procedure, and you also have to go very slowly with your hands. You have to pay attention to not only the yawing of the Dremel, but also the depth. You don't want to go too deep and sever the panel completely. You just want to put a nice indentation on the surface. Once the procedure is complete, it looks something like this. And here's the top deck with the procedure now complete. As you can see, the line has been perfectly etched into the panel, thus giving the illusion that the engine deck is separate from the two hull sides. One important note to make is that after you peel the tape, once the line is complete, you will have a burr on the leading edges of where the trench now lies. To remove that, you just go over the area with that of a palm sander with some medium grit sandpaper, and that will just buff away any burr left, leaving for a nice smooth surface. Now this procedure needs to be done to both the Armortek M4A4 or the Firefly kit like you see here. Also, it can be performed to the first generation M4A4 Sherman that was released in the first run. Now the difference between the two kits is that, like I mentioned before, on this version here on the Firefly, this panel here is made out of a softer aluminum, while on the M4A4 that plate was made out of a steel plate of the same thickness. The procedure can still be done, however with the steel plate you need to take a little bit more time with etching the line, as the steel is a little bit harder than the aluminum to cut. Also, while on that, because of the close proximity you will be with the line, and also with all of the type of procedure this is, it's going to kick up a lot of dust and fragmentation, which will be that of the aluminum that you're cutting away, and also that of the cutting stone itself. Neither of which of material you would like to have in your lungs or in your eyes. So it's really highly recommended that you wear proper eye and breathing protection. In this case, I utilize my respirator mask, which has both an integral visor plate as well as a air filter to help protect me from getting all this nasty stuff where it shouldn't belong. And here we can see that the hull is all one piece. With the two top decks now mounted, the vehicle is now another step closer to being complete. With the installation of both the rear and front halves of the upper deck, I then turn my attention and focus a bit of time on the side hull bodywork. All of the original fastener locations have been thoroughly blended in and sanded nice and flush with that of the armored plate. Also, as of note, usually on Shermans, at this point here, I would usually affix on a long segmented rail that's perforated. These perforated rails are commonly found on Sherman tanks. Purpose of this rail is to mount on side skirts, which would cover up this portion here of the vehicle and prevent dust from flying up. These side skirt rails and side skirts were not developed at the time period that this model is representing, so the rail will not be added to this tank. In addition to removing the fastener locations, all of the side hull welds have been added. This would include the welds along the plates, as well as the welds that are found on where the two plates meet. All these welds are found on the real vehicle. Now with both decks mounted to the vehicle, it's now time to start on the model's turret. Now this is where this portion of the build is going to differ from all the other Armortek M4A4s that are on the market, for the simple fact that all the other Armortek M4A4s are designed to be Fireflies. This version here was custom ordered to be that of an American M4A4. As for the turret itself, like I mentioned in the original unboxing video, the turret is all made out of a single cast piece of aluminum. The turret is actually very realistic to that of the real Sherman in the way it's casted. The turret itself is hollow. The entire turret has if I could describe it, it has a boiling pot type appearance and feel to it. It's all made out of aluminum. It's got a nice rough cast texture already in the casting, so no added cast texturing needs to be added to this piece, which is a very nice touch. In addition to that, just like the real Sherman tank turret castings, all of the machining is already pre-done, and all of the holes are pre-tapped and drilled. The turret is actually really ready to be assembled straight out of the box. In addition to the turret casting itself, Armortek also includes the equipment for that of the bottom portion of the turret. Like I also mentioned in the original unboxing video, it comes sealed in this waxy paper to help preserve it from moisture. These pieces here are all made out of laser cut steel and all assemble very quickly onto the Armortek piece. Included with the Armortek kit is the turret turner gear. As we can see, it's a laser cut steel gear piece. These gear pieces are pretty much standard on all Armortek tanks and are very nicely done and very robust and strong and will handle lots of use. We have the turret neck. The neck itself is also made out of actually a very thick piece of steel. It's probably the thickest piece of metal on the entire vehicle. It's probably about a little over ½ inch thick, solid steel. It looks to be hot rolled, hot pressed. It's all pre-milled out, pre-drilled. And also, if we notice the machining work done on the lip, it's very nicely done. Finally, the last piece of the turret is that of the bottom plate. Bottom plate, again, it's made out of an 1/8 inch piece of steel, and it's already pre-drilled. Pretty much, in a nutshell, the way the system assembles. The steel washer gets bolted to the bottom of the turret, followed by the steel neck, and then to finish it off is the turret turner gear. The entire system is all facilitated with fasteners and assembles actually very quickly. While I have the turret here on hand, I want to take the opportunity to compare the original Armortek 75mm turret with that of an Armortek Firefly 75mm turret. Currently in the shop, I have another Armortek Firefly kit on hand, and that's going to be built for private commission and is going to be the subject matter of an upcoming video series. Here we can see the two turret castings side by side. As you can see, both castings started off identical. The Firefly casting was originally that of the first turret casting that we see here. The only difference is that Armortek went further with some more machining, which is actually very true to what the British actually did to their own Shermans when converting them to a Firefly. Really, the only modifications that Armortek made to the Firefly version of the Sherman is the machining for that of the Firefly-style loader's hatch. These Fireflies that the British manufactured from M4 Shermans all featured turrets that were the single hatch, early style turret that was missing the turret loader's hatch. The turret loader's hatch came a little bit later down the road as the Sherman evolved. The British decided, and rightfully so, that the turret really needs to be accessible for that of the loader, so he could escape as well as even just enter and exit the vehicle a lot more easily. For that, the British cut away at the top roof armor plate of the Shermans and mounted on a loader's hatch of their own design. In addition to the loader's hatch, they also went ahead and drilled out two sections in the back here for that of the counterweight and extra radio box. That type of system is standard on Fireflies, and we'll be going over that once this project starts progressing. The assembly went pretty much straightforward and out of the box. The fasteners were the kit supplied ones, and the only modification that I made to the assembly itself was the addition of a lock washer to the 4 cap screws which hold together the ring and the neck, the gear ring. The lock washers, along with a drop of Loctite, will ensure that everything stays in its proper place. Once you have everything assembled, the turret is now ready to be mounted to the tank and tested. In addition to being ready to be mounted to the tank, the turret is also ready for its detailing, as well as its 75mm gun work, which will be discussed in another video. And here goes the turret now being fitted to the model. As we notice, the turret does not fully seat into the hull turret ring properly, as it is making contact here with the rear portion of the bullet splash shield. What is ironic is that this is not necessarily a mistake, as the real M4A4 Shermans that were produced by Chrysler had the same issue with them. On the real M4A4, what was done was at the factory, they went ahead and removed this section here of the bullet splash rim. With that section removed, the turret can now fully seat into its turret ring. Now, to replace the missing bullet splash ring to protect the bottom portion of the turret, what was done was a thick steel strip was welded and affixed to the rear grillwork here. By attaching the strip of steel to the grillwork, they essentially returned the ballistics for the bullet splash rim and allowed extra room for that of the turret. The same exact modification will be made to this model. To make the modification to the bullet splash rim, I went ahead and marked the area that's going to be removed. I also marked 2 lines on each side. Because the bullet splash rim is actually comprised of 2 separate pieces, I needed to find out exactly where the fasteners are that hold the unit to the hull. Fortunately, the fastener locations are right before the area where I need to remove. So by removing the center portion here, no structural integrity will be lost on the kit supplied bullet splash rims. To remove the pieces, I'll simply use a handsaw, and since the pieces being aluminum, cut very easily through this medium. Once the pieces are removed, the turret will just snap right into its current location, and the modification will be complete. Also, with the removal of the bullet splash rim, I will now have the necessary location to affix the fire extinguisher box, which is mounted in this location here. In addition to removing the bullet splash strip that was in the back portion of the rear deck, I also had to grind down a small little portion here of the quarter panel here of the bullet splash rim. Depending how the vehicle goes together, the rim might make contact with the turret. To ensure nice and smooth operation with a Dremel sanding drum, I just went ahead and gradually sanded the portion down that gave me enough clearance for the turret to rotate nice and smoothly. It's a very simple procedure to do and doesn't affect the finish of the tank whatsoever. In order to do the procedure, you simply put the turret on the tank and try to rotate the turret with the remote. If you see the turret snagging in any certain portions, you mark that location, remove the turret, and then begin the process of the sanding. It may take a few passes. This is specifically true if you go in very thin increments, as you don't want to over sand down the parts. Just a couple 100,000ths of an inch or 2 is more than enough to loosen up the tolerances, and the turret will then perform nice and flawlessly. After the mods were made to the turret ring, as well as the bullet splash rim, the turret now rotates nice and smoothly, and we can go ahead and test it. To test it, like always, I first turn on the radio, turn on the tank. For this test, the sound system will not be needed. As you can see, the turret rotates nice and smoothly, and it rotates in 360 degrees. The only thing that will be added to the turret ring now is a thin film of grease. This will be added as the build progresses, and once the turret no longer needs to be removed from the upper hull. More information on that is to follow. On the bullet splash rims, not only have their welds been added in their appropriate locations, but their casting texture has also been applied. On the real Sherman tank, these components here were made out of casted metal and do have a cast metal appearance. This is not only true for the bullet splash rim, but also for the fuel cap protectors here. On both the fuel cap protector as well as the bullet splash rim, there is a small little rain gullet right here on the rear portion of the rim. I've seen a lot of 1/6 scale Shermans in which this portion here is either not present or is drilled with a hole that's way too small. Typically on my builds, I don't like to go below 3/32 of an inch for these holes. These holes are a very simple addition that can really help the look of the model. As for which style to use, that depends really on the type of style that you prefer. When it comes to these components here, depending on the subcontractor and foundry who made the parts, the styles of drainage holes can differ. I've seen all sorts of different styles, from single holes to double holes to even large cutout cavities on some vehicles. As for which style you would like for your own build, that depends on personal taste as well as just doing a little research on the internet. In addition to doing the bodywork removal for the fastener locations on the side of the vehicle, more bodywork was also done on the upper deck. The kit has pre-lasered into the plate the locations for the kit supplied's tools. For the tools on this build, I will be fabricating my own tool posts, so the kit supplied holes were no longer needed and were simply sanded flush with the bodywork. Moving our way past the front, we have here the turret's rear air blower. The armored air blower that we have here is another resin casting from East Coast Armory. Now the Armortek kit does supply you with a turn CNC air filter. The air filter itself is also nicely shaped and does have the mounting holes for the slot screw fasteners, which are not supplied with the kit. But again, rather than having to rework the kit unit, I simply just swapped it out for the ECA one. The ECA one not only has its cast texture, has its slot screw detailing, as well as its casting marks that we see here. Finally, at the rear portion of the vehicle, we have here the rear lift hook, as well as the grouser compartment vent. This is also a mirror image on the reverse side of the tank. Both of these components are also found on the EastCoastArmory.com product line. When it comes to the lift hook, on these earlier style Shermans, the lift hook was actually attached to a base, and then that whole plate was then welded to the tank. As for the vent, like I mentioned before, I've seen a few sources refer to this area here as a grouser storage vent. This rear portion here of the vehicle would be a small little compartment in which to stow track grousers as well as some other equipment. Because these components would be wet and would be moist and damp, it was designed to have an elevated vent in order just to have some circulation in there, just to have everything dry up. To facilitate that, a cast metal vent was constructed and bolted to the tank via a strap on the inside. The Armortek kit does supply you with a solid CNC unit. The unit is more or less a CNC aluminum nub and would get epoxy to the upper deck. Rather than using the Armortek unit, I went ahead and used the set from ECA. The EastCoastArmory.com version is a hollow resin casting complete with cast texture. Also supplied with the kit is the meshwork that we have here, a very long fastener, and a brass strip in order to bolt it to the tank, just like on the original unit. And that concludes this project update video for this 1/6 scale Armortek M4A4 Sherman tank. If you like this video, stop by and like us on Facebook, and don't forget to check out EastCoastArmory.com for more 1/6 scale tank builds, as well as other 1/6 scale detail components.